There was an old hunter, long separated from his hometown, who yearned to reunite with those he had left behind. Despite his old age, he persisted in heaving his aching muscles and ragged bones forward, one step after another. All of creation exists upon the axis of time. No matter how high a mountain may be or how deep an ocean may reach, time will grind them to dust all the same. It's not that time is the enemy. It is a unifying force which does not discriminate, which simply marches on and has all of life and land march right alongside it. Across the world, the effects of time depict themselves in various ways, be it in the fresh green groves whose future promises bounty, or the tropical ecosystems at the height of their lifetimes. But some places also exemplify the other end of it, the end of time. Deserts, endless sheets of sand and rock, are a glimpse at what all must eventually return to. Dried oceans and crumbled mountains all end up here, among the sands. And yet, deserts are far from dead. Many of them are teeming with life, and few places show that quite as clearly as the sandy plains. Initially discovered by hunters of Port Tanzia, this desert sticks out due to its ecological variety. While its northern side is indeed made up of dunes and sand, the sandy plains are more starkly defined by the areas that do not conform to the stereotypical image of a desert. Throughout the center, the sandy plains are littered with cracked rocky clearings, sandstone caves, and mounds created by the local dominant insect type, the Altaroth. There are even small oases covered in lush greenery that harshly contrast the brown and yellow desert. But what makes the sandy plains even more intriguing is the presence of human ruins all across the area. In the west, the rocky desert mounds are crowned with ancient brickwork and the remnants of what might have been a place of worship, a watchtower, or maybe something else altogether. Whatever it was has been almost entirely swallowed by the desert. As one descends into the sandstone caves, further and further still, these ruins become increasingly present, a phenomenon no guild scholar has been able to explain conclusively. The lowest point of the sandy plains, deep within the sandstone depths, is what looks like a derelict arena, although it could just as well have been a town square, as ignorant as we are of the past. No humans now dwell in these abandoned sites. Instead, the sandy plains have become host to an immense variety of animals and monsters alike, with a surprising number of species calling this desolate wasteland their home. A map showed that his village was just over the horizon, but an unfamiliar wasteland sprawled between him and it. Barely escaping the hungry jaws of countless monsters, he pressed on, willful that he would put this savage land behind him ere long. The sands and the dunes of the sandy plains constitute a sort of first great filter. Any creature that lives here must, before all else, solve the problem of locomotion across these hot and deceptive surfaces. In order to address any of the other obstacles that come with living in desert areas, food, shelter, water, etc., one must first be able to reliably move across the dunes, something that is easier said than done. To move swiftly and effectively on this treacherous terrain, which crumbles around you as you move, various creatures developed adaptations that give them more stability and speed on sand. And none are quite as effective in their all-terrain traversal as those of the Volvidon. With a name that translates to revolving tooth, the Volvidon lives up to its moniker. This bizarre fanged beast sticks out in the desert due to its bright red carapace, whose rounded hump and spiked cranial crests give the creature a distinct and characteristic look. This look has a special function. The Volvidon's armor is actually a collection of dermal bone plates and scutes, which are segmented around the creature's midsection, similar to that of an armadillo. The armadillo's armor is made up of two sets: bone plates that sit beneath the skin and more flexible keratin scutes that sit on top of it. The Volvidon's carapace functions similarly. It too has massive bone plates beneath its skin, but instead of keratin, the material on top of the bony plates is a uniquely resistant type of tissue only found on the Volvidon, which some hunters have come to affectionately call Volvidon rickrack for its zigzag texture. This rickrack constitutes an immense level of protection for the Volvidon, as it is almost entirely impervious to heat, both that of the desert and that of any other source. It can even repel and resist the temperatures of fire and lava. But that protection is only half of the Volvidon's true ability. Just like an armadillo, it can roll up into a ball, with its various rickrack segments sliding into place to fully envelop the beast's vital spots. In this stance, the Volvidon becomes quite invulnerable, and it can take it even further. Specialized muscles that surround the rickrack allow the Volvidon to roll around at fairly high speeds, giving it a fast and extremely safe way of traveling across the sand. Rolling across the dunes is efficient and minimizes dangers, as the hard rickrack withstands attackers just as well as it bounces around environmental obstacles. This adaptation to both heat and uneven terrain is so great that certain populations of Volvidon have even been able to migrate and establish themselves in volcanic areas instead of the dusty deserts that they emerged from. The Volvidon of the sandy plains are thus quick on their feet, and always ready to roll away from any danger, as they are generally not particularly aggressive. As pure insectivores, Volvidon avoid direct conflict and instead prefer lurking around the nests of Altaroth and Bnahabra. The sandy plains are full of Altaroth mounds specifically, and so the Volvidon spends much of its time digging them up and then devouring juvenile Altaroth with its long and highly flexible tongue. Due to this lifestyle, the Volvidon rarely finds itself fighting, but should it ever be forced to fight, it can nonetheless make for a formidable foe. Its rickrack makes for both a strong defense and offense, as the beast can crash into an attacker at full speed, rolling into them and causing damage on impact. However, because of how the Volvidon curls up, it is effectively blind when in full protective position, as its eyes are fully covered. Thus, it might have to defend itself unfurled in certain situations. In those cases, the Volvidon's sharp single claws can lacerate opponents, and its long tongue can function much like a whip. But beyond raw physicality, the Volvidon has a trick up its sleeve. The insects it eats do not just satiate the beast's hunger, but also allow it to harness their various chemical abilities. Bnahabra have a poisonous sting, with a venom that causes paralysis when it enters the body, either through injection or even through skin absorption. The Volvidon is not only immune to this venom, but its digestive tract is also specifically adapted to storing it and mixing the venom into the beast's saliva, giving it the same paralytic properties. Thus, a Volvidon can simply spit at attackers in order to incapacitate them, leaving them a twitching, helpless mess on the ground. Should an attacker avoid even that, The Volvidon's digestion has one more weapon to throw at them, and what a nasty one it is. The Volvidon's primary prey in the sandy plains are Altaroth, which are small neopterons that feed on mushrooms. They are generally defenseless, but are capable of spraying a pungent liquid to deter any predators. Just like the venom of the Bnahabra, this liquid too is stored by the Volvidon, accumulated in the gaps between its scutes, and remixed into a much higher concentration than would be possible in the Altaroth's small bodies. When threatened with immediate predation, the Volvidon can explosively release this foul compound as an aerosol liquid in droplets so tiny that it looks like gas, spraying from all over the Volvidon's body, specifically its backside. Even a small splash of this liquid produces a smell so disgusting that it instantly induces a major gag reflex, killing the appetite of most predators, leading them to leave the Volvidon alone. Getting sprayed by this nasty attack is especially bad for hunters, as their throats become cramped and reject any of the healing potions and elixirs the guild equips them with. These defenses make fighting the Volvidon such a hassle that most hunters do not consider it worth the trouble, as it's an unbothered creature that generally does not cause major problems as long as it is left alone. Several days passed with no sign of his home anywhere. He began to fear some fault in the map had led him astray. Traversing the sandy plains, one will encounter many such creatures, monsters that are honestly often best left alone. In this harsh environment, many of them have developed to minimize conflict, which means they are either good at running, good at hiding, good at finishing fights quickly, or all of the above. Thus, it is generally unwise to go looking for a fight. However, some of the monsters in the sandy plains are so good at hiding in plain sight specifically that one might stumble onto them entirely by accident. For example, a rocky mound may suddenly start shaking when touched. In such a case, the creature that was disturbed would quickly reveal itself to be a Basarios. As perhaps the most well-known representatives of the superfamily of armor wyverns, the Basarios was discovered extremely early in the guild's research efforts, and has since only become more widespread and successful. Basarios are juvenile armor wyvern that have yet to mature into their adult form, a Gravios, but even at their relatively young age, they are imposing. Massive flying wyvern covered in hard shelling, with an enormous pile of rocks and boulders fused to their back. The Basarios skin is exceptionally tough, even harder than that of its adult form. This is to protect the relatively dull-witted juvenile from harm, as its slow and heavy body and small brain do not allow for elegant and effective evasion of combat. Not that a Basarios would really even seek out that combat. Abandoned by their mothers shortly after birth, Basarios spend their youth hiding, trying to stay safe and grow until they can transition into a much more powerful and fierce Gravios. During this youth, Basarios hide using their strong wing claws to burrow into the ground, submerging everything except their rocky backs, making them look like an inconspicuous pile of rocks. By slowly swimming through the ground, the Basarios can move around mostly unseen, as it navigates to its two major food sources, ores and insects. Ores provide it with the material needed to strengthen and expand its hide, while insects are full of protein necessary to bulk up the wyvern's muscles. This lifestyle continues until maturity, a slow and peaceful process that the Basarios rarely risk by entering conflict. Should a Basarios find itself in a pinch, however, it is far from helpless. Its tough hide alone is impervious to almost any attack, with only the strongest opponents even being able to as much as chip it. This defense can also be used for counterattacks, as the massive wyvern can crush its enemies by running into them or rolling around on top of them. A solid facial armor plate adorned with 2 short horns allows for extremely devastating headbutts as well. The Basarios can even swim through the ground and attack from below, making it surprisingly versatile. Should the Basarios' raw physicality not be enough to deter an opponent, it can resort to its ultimate weapon, its furnace. Inside a Basarios lies a crude organ called a furnace, which directly connects to the digestive tract and allows the creature to store and convert various elements of its nutrition into useful waste compounds. Its most natural application is to heat part of the ingested ore up until it melts into a viscous, magma-like substance, which the Basarios can then explosively spit out, either in chunks or as a powerful beam, essentially functioning the same as a fire sack. The furnace can however also heat ingested material into gas of various properties. The Basario skin is littered with vents, which connect directly into the furnace and can be used to expel the produced gas. This gas can be flaming hot, venomous, or even sleep-inducing, allowing the Basarios a wide array of defensive options at close range. This is not without danger, however. Using the flaming gas and fire breath heats up its hide, making it softer and more susceptible to damage. Nonetheless, these abilities allow most Basarios to live out their life cycle in relative peace. Curiously, while Basarios are fairly common in the sandy plains, their adult form, Gravios, has not once been sighted in the area. This has led to much speculation, but the most likely explanation is that once grown, they simply migrate. Gravios generally prefer swampy or volcanic habitats, so it is entirely plausible that the sandy plains serve as a sort of nursery for young Basarios to grow up in before moving on to more suitable environments as adults. Then, finally, he came upon a path that plunged into the underbelly of the void. Shaken, uneasy, he descended it withal. The fact that it can think of the harsh sandy plains as a nursery speaks to the enormous power of the Gravios and Basarios. As for many other creatures, this arid waste is anything but safe and comforting. In fact, the rough environment and sparse nutrition often bring out the most desperate type of creativity in those that find themselves here. This applies even to established species. The Bishaten of the Shrine Ruins is just about the last creature that one would expect in a desert, as its reliance on juicy forest fruit make it entirely unsuitable for this environment. And yet, the sandy plains are home to a subspecies of Bishaten, the blood orange Bishaten. These orange and black fanged beasts look very similar to the forest cousins, having virtually no immediately visible physical changes besides the differently colored fur. But their very presence in the sandy plains is bizarre. The Bishaten centers both its nutrition and main defense mechanism around persimmons, which are a type of fruit only found in mild and humid climates. There certainly are none to be found in a desert such as this, so how does this Bishaten subspecies survive? If there is one constant in life, it's that it always finds a way. And so, the blood orange Bishaten adapted to survive without its beloved persimmons, and instead found a new primary food source: pyre cones. These pine cones grow in almost every habitat imaginable, as their main plant is extremely low maintenance, and are notable for their size and their immense flammability. That flammability comes from a high energy liquid stored in the center of the cone, extremely nutritious but not easily eaten and digested. The forest Bishaten, however, is already adapted to eating poisonous and paralytic persimmons, so it was likely not long before a population of Bishaten discovered that they could use pyrocones as a primary food item. This was an extremely advantageous adaptation, as pyrocones are not fragile and can grow almost anywhere, drastically increasing the Bishaten's possible habitats. As this adaptation was passed on and entered the gene pool, a distinct subspecies of cone-eating Bishatens emerged, which the guild officially classified as blood orange Bishaten. As they patrol the sandy plains, among many other environments, with pyrocones stored securely in their furry pouch, the blood orange Bishaten are mischievous and somewhat hostile creatures. They are considered more aggressive than their forest cousins, as they are often observed bullying other monsters, including forest Bishaten. This temper likely comes from their newfound power. The blood orange Bishaten has, through repeated ingestion of the pyrocone liquid, itself developed a flammable type of saliva, allowing it to spew fire at will. This is by itself a fearsome ability, as the flames it can breathe are highly concentrated and destructive. But what makes this even more troubling is the Bishaten's intelligence. As a fanged beast of the order Pelagousia, it is capable of various higher cognitive feats, one of which being tool use. And because all Bishaten species have a pouch in which they carry their food at almost all times, the blood orange Bishaten found a creative way to use its food as weapons. By spitting a small amount of its fiery saliva onto a pyrocone, the blood orange Bishaten can prime it, causing it to rapidly heat up. This turns the pyrocone into a makeshift bomb, as its internal liquid begins glowing until the entire cone explodes, with its outer spines serving as shrapnel. This weapon becomes deadly in the hands of the deft Bishaten. Its long ancestry of throwing persimmons at its opponents translates exceptionally well to now throwing primed pyrocones, to devastating effect. By throwing the cones with a spin, the blood orange Bishaten can alter the trajectory of its projectiles, masterfully encircling and outmaneuvering its poor victim. In a particularly brutal move, it can even shatter multiple pyrocones and spread their still primed and burning pieces all across the ground, where they will soon detonate in a massive explosion. This ability, coupled with the Bishaten's innate physical strength and dexterity, make the orange subspecies an extremely dangerous creature to encounter. Many travelers avoid the sandy plains specifically for this reason, as while Bishaten aren't extremely common, they still pose a looming threat for those that travel across the plains and the rocky plateaus. This building was familiar. He knew it too well. But no wonder he couldn't find it. It had been buried under the sand. Said travel across the plains has, as of late, become even more dangerous than it once was, unfortunately. Normally, a traveler must mostly look out for the orange Bishaten, which are somewhat easy to avoid by giving any pyrocone plants a wide berth. The other species that inhabit the sandy plains are generally not interested in bothering anyone. From the small Jaggy to the imposing and great Diablos, they all largely stick to themselves if they aren't provoked. Except one creature. One that is unfortunately impossible to avoid once it sets its sight on you. For this fiend attacks from above. The Serrated. This powerful flying wyvern poses a massive threat to any ecosystem it enters. This is due to the Serrated extreme aggression, as it is a ruthless apex predator that has evolved to be able to hold its own against the likes of Deviljho and Brachydios. The Serrated spends much of its time in the air, scouting out the lands for suitable territories, which can often be enormous for a single individual. Once such a territory has been found, the wyvern defends it with intense jealousy, lashing out at anything it perceives as a threat to its dominance. It does so through its unparalleled flying prowess. Its slender yet muscular body allows for extremely precise and quick maneuvers, making the Seregios an equal to Rathalos. The Seregios' feet are zygodactyl, meaning that they have 2 toes on the front and 2 on the back. This allows the wyvern to perform truly deadly and elaborate maneuvers, as it crashes into its prey at high speeds, feet stretched out to either grab or kick whatever is unfortunate enough to get hit by it. And even when grounded, the wyvern's slender body allows for surprisingly flexible attacks, where it uses its spiked tail and sharp talons to inflict devastating damage. Its legs are so muscular and so flexible that even while standing perfectly grounded, it can still use them for absolutely devastating attacks. But all of that pales in comparison to the Seregios' true ability. One of the most striking features of this wyvern is its scale armor, which is a brilliant gold. These scales are not just for show. Through specialized muscles, they can be moved, erected, vibrated, and even detached and launched. When sufficiently agitated, the Seregios will initiate its threat display, where all of the scales stand up and begin rattling aggressively, making the creature seem larger and bulkier than before. Additionally, a sharp horn, which usually sits folded backwards on the backside of the creature's head, snaps forward from the Seregios' forehead, protruding menacingly. This display is an imposing warning, one that must be heeded. Should an opponent refuse to back down, they will learn the true name of the Seregios' scales: blade scales. Each scale is razor sharp and causes cuts and lacerations at the slightest graze. This means that even if one dodges a Seregios' assault, it is entirely possible to find oneself covered in a myriad of cuts if the beast as much as lightly touches its target. More worryingly, because the scales can be detached, the Seregios can swing its tail to launch the blade scales as crude projectiles, where they either hit a target and embed themselves into their flesh, or get stuck in the ground, where they lay as traps for unsuspecting victims. The Seregios even uses these scales to mark its large territory, sticking them into trees and rocks all around the perimeter as a warning. And due to the odd shape of the scale's razor edge, the wounds they leave behind are often fatal, either causing deadly blood loss or incurring infection. They are considered extremely hard to stitch up. The Seregios is considered an invasive species, as it claims territories all across the world and disrupts local ecosystems constantly. Many mysteries still remain about the creature. Upon first discovery, it was believed that it could not survive in desert regions, but shortly after, discoveries of Seregios living happily in the arid wastes became increasingly common. Tissue analysis has suggested that the species does not actually originate from the Old World continent, which has led some researchers to believe it might actually be a New World species that was simply observed first in the Old World. Believers of this hypothesis often cite the notable physical similarities between the Seregios and the New World Basilgoose as further evidence for this, as their fairly similar facial structure and detachable scale adaptations could suggest a shared ancestry. The guild has, however, as of yet not recognized this possibility, as no Seregios has ever been sighted in the New World. As many Seregios make the sandy plains their home, it seems the wasteland finds its apex, the creature that stands above all in any given environment. But it is rarely so easy. While the Seregios is by far the most threatening monster that is regularly found here, there exists a special clade of monsters who seem to have emerged solely to upend our preconceived notions of the natural world: the Elder Dragons. Hoping to find something left behind, anything, he entered his old house. On the wall was written a message. As the crimson glow falls upon us, our people flee this land. But I promise to survive, that we too may reunite. There is nature, and then there are Elder Dragons. Dismissed as a waste bin classification by many, Elder Dragons are extraordinarily powerful and mysterious creatures, coming in varying shapes and sizes, but all capable of causing harm and destruction at a scale beyond human imagination. The Sandy Plains are not exactly unfamiliar with Elder Dragons. Not far off, in the Great Desert, lies the city of Loklak, where hunters gather regularly for the Moran festival. During that time of the year, the Moran, gargantuan whale-like elder dragons that swim through the sand as if it were water, emerge from the depths, leading many adventurers to pursue them in an attempt to mine off the precious ores that form on their hides. While that does constitute regular elder dragon activity in the vicinity, the Moran never actually come too near to the sandy plains, as they need loose sand to maneuver their massive bodies around. But because of their relatively close presence, the sandy plains were long considered an area free of elder dragons, as the Moran served as a deterrent for other elders. This has, however, been proven false, as new sightings and a review of historical records have revealed that one other elder dragon has historically invaded the sandy plains to deadly effect: the Crimson Glow Valstrax. The Valstrax is one of the more elusive elder dragons in a class of monsters defined by the fact that they are elusive. After it was only recently discovered by the Wycademy of Berna, knowledge about the Valstrax was slow to be accumulated, mostly due to its habitat. The Valstrax generally spends most of its time in the upper atmosphere, flying at speeds unmatched by any animal or machine. It achieves this feat through three key adaptations: its slender body, covered in sleek aerodynamic silver scales; its dragon sac, which produces the rare and powerful dragon element; and its wings, which are modified into tridents with exhaust-like vents at the ends. These exhausts can expel dragon element alongside the air the Valstrax inhales through openings in its chest explosively. This produces rapid propulsion, allowing for supersonic flight. Despite this fearsome adaptation and their general appearance, Valstrax are generally fairly calm, as they stick to the upper atmosphere and only rarely land on the highest mountaintops. While they are fearsome fighters, they rarely show aggressive behaviors, which makes the Valstrax of the sandy plains even more puzzling. The fact that a Valstrax would even bother to land this far below the skies it calls home is by itself extremely atypical, an anomaly further bolstered by their behavior. While Valstrax are normally known to be of calm and tame temper, the Valstrax found in the sandy plains are hyper-aggressive, lashing out at anything and everything they see. Moreover, Valstrax are not known to claim territories. They fly through the sky endlessly, never staying in one place for too long, the only consistency being the high atmosphere. By comparison, the Valstrax of the sandy plains are downright tethered to the area, as they appear numerous times in the history and mythology left behind by the lost civilizations, suggesting an almost consistent population of them. These factors puzzled the guild for some time, until a tissue sample, as well as repeated sightings, revealed that these Valstrax were, in fact, physically changed. Specifically, they were absolutely doused in dragon energy, with the dangerous element having seeped into every pore of their body, which usually should not be the case. This finally led to these Valstrax to be reclassified as their own variant, named Crimson Glow Valstrax. While the precise mechanism isn't fully understood, a Valstrax mutates into this form when their dragon sac becomes damaged and begins leaking the dragon energy into the rest of the creature's body, causing it to mutate in extreme agony. This process has a precedent with the Savage Deviljho, and it is believed to be similar to that. Because harboring so much uncontrolled dragon energy is extremely dangerous and painful, these Valstrax fall down into the lower atmosphere and begin spending more time on land, as the pain makes flying difficult. It is this pain that makes the Crimson Glow Valstrax so dangerous. While the regular version is calm and passive, these variants have their temper heightened by constant agony, causing them to attack anything they encounter. By crashing into them at supersonic speeds, the Crimson Glow Valstrax can pulverize its opponents in a massive explosion of dragon energy, as the creature can often be seen coated in the element, a powerful side effect of its miserable predicament. But what makes this Valstrax so dangerous is that it has all the abilities of a regular Valstrax, but now unleashed in pure rage. The articulate jet wings are not just means of transportation. While they are usually pointing backwards like regular wings in order to allow for propulsion, the Valstrax can actually twist its wings to have its tridented wing fingers point forward. In this state, these become highly effective cannons that can blast prey into bits with dragon energy, or even combine their output to unleash a brutal dragon beam. But even without this energy, the Valstrax's highly flexible wing fingers give it enormous versatility in combat. They can stab, swipe, crush, and cut opponents to death with a deceptively long range of attack. However, the Crimson Glow Valstrax has been noted to be slower than the regular Valstrax, and it seems to need to inhale air much more frequently, likely consequences of the burden the rampant energy puts on the poor beast's body. What is still subject to much speculation is why these Crimson Glow Valstrax keep appearing in the Sandy Plains specifically. The fact that they fall down to earth when their dragon sac overwhelms them should imply that they can sporadically appear anywhere, and while that seems to be the case, their presence in the Sandy Plains is especially pronounced. Almost every historic account of the area mentions a crimson comet that brings disaster, and it is very likely that most of these various civilizations that lived here at various points in time were destroyed or at least impacted by such a Crimson Glow Valstrax sighting. This would mean that they regularly land in the Sandy Plains, which has given rise to a theory that suggests that the skies above the Sandy Plains are, for some reason, a popular flight path for healthy Valstrax, making it more likely for a mutated one to fall to Earth here than in other areas. And so the old hunter set out once more, vowing never to rest or falter, as he yet had a duty to his love to fulfill. Time wears down everything and everyone. The Sandy Plains and the entire desert peninsula represent a place in which time has won, where rock is scarred, earth is crushed into dust, and water blazed into vapor. The end of the road. And yet, life finds a way, adapts in unexpected ways, unyielding and unflinching. Some keep to themselves, while others lust for battle, as some others simply seek a place where they can perish and end their agony. While it may take many forms, it is nonetheless a testament to its beauty that life flourishes even here, at the end of time. A very special thank you to all of my patrons, including Fictionape, Cini, Eric Nelson, Ethan Miller, Geo, Jameson Tate, Carthair, Oak Wood Tree, Claire Meboon, Makot O2, Mr. Pyramid, Mr. Meander, Paracha, Pide Fuego, Peroscoco, Project Iceman, Wisdom Minari, Iron Camel, and Courage. I will see you again soon, so stay safe and be well, my friends. Goodbye.